Assumptions made in seconds can undo years of sacrifice. They happen fast, almost without thought. A glance, a tone, a piece of clothing, the way someone speaks or stands, and a story forms in the mind. That story feels real, even when it has no evidence behind it. People trust it because it's easy. It saves time. It gives a sense of control. But those seconds can erase decades of effort, discipline, and pain that someone carried quietly. Sacrifice rarely looks impressive on the surface. It doesn't always wear a uniform or announce itself with medals. Most of the time, it looks ordinary. It looks tired. It looks like someone who kept going long after they were supposed to stop. A mother who worked double shifts. A parent who missed birthdays. A person who trained before dawn and slept after midnight. None of that shows up in a single moment. But assumptions don't wait to find out. They rush in and flatten the truth. When people assume, they reduce a life to a snapshot. They forget that every person in front of them has a past they didn't witness. Years of choices, consequences, and resilience are ignored because they don't fit the first impression. One wrong guess can strip someone of dignity. It can turn respect into suspicion. It can turn patience into aggression. And once that line is crossed, the damage is already done. The danger is that assumptions feel harmless to the person making them. They think it's just an opinion, just a reaction, just common sense. But on the other side of that moment is someone who feels dismissed, judged, or threatened. Someone who has earned their place through effort no one bothered to ask about. Sacrifice doesn't protect you from being misunderstood. In many cases, it makes you quieter, less visible, easier to overlook. Years of sacrifice often teach people to endure without explanation. They learn not to correct others, not to boast, not to interrupt. They trust that character will speak for itself. But assumptions don't listen. They speak louder and faster. They don't care about truth. They care about comfort. And comfort prefers simple stories over complicated realities. This is how respect gets reversed. The person who is given the most is treated as if they deserve the least. Authority is challenged. Worth is questioned. Boundaries are crossed. All because someone believed their first thought was more accurate than someone else's entire history. It's not just unfair. It's reckless. What makes this worse is how often assumptions are reinforced by groups. One person reacts, others follow. No one wants to be the one who pauses and says, "Maybe we're wrong." Momentum replaces judgment. Confidence replaces caution. And suddenly, a small misunderstanding becomes a public humiliation or a physical confrontation. The years of sacrifice don't just get ignored. They get trampled. People forget that sacrifice shapes behavior. It creates discipline. It creates restraint. It creates humility. Those traits are often mistaken for weakness or submission by people who don't recognize them. They see calm and assume compliance. They see silence and assume guilt. They see patience and assume permission. That misunderstanding can escalate quickly. Assumptions also reveal more about the person making them than the person receiving them. They expose biases, insecurities, and unexamined beliefs. They show who relies on shortcuts instead of empathy, who judges instead of asks, who reacts instead of listens. But the cost is paid by the person being judged, not the person doing the judging. Years of sacrifice build something solid inside a person. Confidence that doesn't need approval. Strength that doesn't seek validation. Honor that doesn't demand recognition. But even that strength can be tested when assumptions turn into actions. When someone is disrespected publicly. When their humanity is questioned. When their presence is treated as a problem. The tragedy is that all of this could be avoided with a pause. A question. A moment of humility. But assumptions don't pause. They rush ahead and leave consequences behind. And once those consequences land, apologies come too late to erase the insult, the injury, or the reminder that years of sacrifice can be undone in seconds by someone who never bothered to look deeper. Respect isn't owed to appearances, but actions reveal character. Appearances are quick, shallow signals. They are shaped by culture, bias, and expectation. People are taught, often without realizing it, to read worth in clothing, posture, age, and expression. A uniform can earn instant trust. A casual outfit can invite doubt. A tired face can be mistaken for indifference. But none of these things explain who a person really is. They only explain how comfortable others feel making judgments. When respect is tied to appearance, it becomes conditional. It depends on fitting a mold that someone else created. The moment a person steps outside that mold, respect is withdrawn. This kind of respect is fragile and unreliable. It can disappear the second assumptions take over. True respect doesn't work that way. It isn't granted because someone looks impressive. It's earned through how someone behaves when it matters. Actions carry weight because they require choice. Showing restraint when anger would be easier. Showing kindness when no one is watching. Showing courage without expecting praise. These moments reveal character far more clearly than any outward signal. A person's actions tell you what they value, what they protect, and what they're willing to stand up for. Appearance can be crafted. Character cannot be faked for long. The problem is that society often reverses this order. People are respected first and evaluated later. Others are doubted first and forced to prove themselves. This creates a quiet injustice. Those who look the part are forgiven for poor behavior. Those who don't are punished even when they do everything right. Over time, this teaches people the wrong lesson. It tells them that looking powerful matters more than being principled. When someone is treated with respect based on appearance alone, their actions are rarely questioned. Mistakes are excused. Harm is minimized. Accountability is softened. On the other hand, when someone is denied respect because they don't fit expectations, every action is scrutinized. Neutral behavior is seen as suspicious. Firm boundaries are seen as aggression. Silence is seen as guilt. This imbalance distorts reality and escalates conflict. Actions reveal character most clearly under pressure. When a situation becomes uncomfortable or uncertain, the mask slips. The person who relies on appearance may react defensively, arrogantly, or violently when challenged. The person who relies on character often responds with control and clarity, not because they are weak, but because they are grounded. They know who they are without needing external validation. Respect should be a baseline, not a reward for looking the right way. It should exist before assumptions are made. It should protect people from being dismissed, humiliated, or harmed based on shallow impressions. When respect is withheld until someone proves themselves, the damage often happens before the truth has a chance to surface. Actions also reveal how someone treats those they believe have no power. The way a person speaks to a stranger, a service worker, or someone they think cannot push back says more than any title or status ever could. Courtesy in these moments is not about manners. It's about recognizing shared humanity. Disrespect in these moments exposes entitlement and insecurity. People who live by their actions rather than their appearance don't need to announce who they are. They don't correct assumptions immediately. They let time and behavior do the work. This quiet confidence is often misunderstood at first, but it holds steady. When the truth becomes visible, it carries weight because it was earned, not performed. The danger of judging by appearance is not just that it's wrong, but that it excuses cruelty. It gives people permission to act first and think later, to dominate instead of understand, to assert control instead of show restraint. Once actions cross a line, no revelation of truth can undo the harm already done. Respect grounded in character changes how people behave toward one another. It slows reactions. It encourages listening. It creates space for dignity even in disagreement. When people are judged by what they do rather than how they look, accountability becomes fairer and trust becomes possible. Actions don't just reveal character. They demand it. A mother's quiet strength often goes unseen. It doesn't announce itself or demand recognition. It moves in the background, steady and patient, shaping lives without drawing attention. This kind of strength isn't loud or dramatic. It shows up in early mornings, late nights, and choices made for someone else's future instead of her own comfort. Because it's constant, people overlook it. Because it's gentle, people underestimate it. From the outside, quiet strength can look like ordinary routine. Packing meals, making calls, showing up on time, listening more than speaking. But behind those small actions is endurance that doesn't fade easily. A mother learns to carry worry without letting it spill. She absorbs stress so others don't have to feel it. She adapts to changing circumstances without complaint. Over time, this becomes invisible labor, expected rather than acknowledged. Society often praises visible power, loud confidence, commanding presence, quick reactions. Quiet strength doesn't fit that image. It doesn't interrupt. It doesn't dominate a room. It waits, observes, and responds when necessary. That restraint is mistaken for passivity. That patience is mistaken for weakness. But patience requires control, and control requires strength. A mother's strength is tested in moments no one witnesses. When fear rises, but she stays calm. When exhaustion sets in, but responsibilities don't stop. When sacrifices are made quietly, so someone else can move forward. These moments don't come with applause. There's no audience to validate the effort. Yet they shape outcomes in lasting ways. Quiet strength also means knowing when not to act. Not every challenge needs confrontation. Not every slight needs a response. A mother learns which battles matter and which ones drain energy without purpose. That discernment is hard-earned. It comes from experience, from mistakes, from watching consequences unfold over time. Choosing restraint over reaction is not a lack of power. It's a refined form of it. Because this strength is subtle, it's often revealed only when tested. When boundaries are crossed. When respect is denied. When assumptions turn into actions. In those moments, the calm presence that once seemed unremarkable becomes unmistakable. The same person who stayed quiet now stands firm. The same voice that rarely raised itself speaks with clarity and authority. And people are surprised, not because the strength appeared suddenly, but because they never bothered to notice it before. A mother's quiet strength is rooted in responsibility. Knowing that someone depends on you changes how you move through the world. It sharpens awareness. It deepens patience. It forces growth even when conditions are unfair. This responsibility builds resilience that doesn't need recognition to exist. It simply continues. There is also a protective aspect to this strength. It watches closely. It anticipates danger. It prepares for outcomes others don't consider. While appearing calm, a mother is often running through contingencies in her mind. She is ready to act if needed, but she hopes she won't have to. This balance between readiness and restraint is difficult to maintain, and yet it becomes second nature. People who underestimate quiet strength often do so because they equate noise with power. They assume that the person who speaks the loudest holds the most authority. They assume that confidence must be visible to be real. Quiet strength challenges that belief. It operates without performance. It doesn't need validation from others to remain intact. When this strength is ignored or disrespected, the harm runs deeper than people realize. It isn't just an insult to the individual. It's a dismissal of years of effort, care, and sacrifice. It's a failure to recognize the foundation that allowed others to stand taller. And once that line is crossed, the response may be measured, but it will be resolute. A mother's quiet strength doesn't seek dominance. It seeks stability. It doesn't aim to win arguments. It aims to protect what matters. That focus gives it durability. Long after louder forms of power fade, this strength remains, steady and unyielding, shaping outcomes without ever asking to be seen. Power shifts the moment truth is revealed. Before that moment, everything rests on perception. Who people think you are determines how they treat you. Authority, respect, and safety are often granted or denied based on incomplete information. In that space, power belongs to whoever controls the narrative, even if that narrative is wrong. Assumptions create a false hierarchy where confidence outweighs correctness and volume replaces understanding. When truth is hidden, intentionally or not, imbalance thrives. People act boldly because they believe there will be no consequences. They interrupt, dismiss, and dominate because they think the other person has no leverage. This kind of power is fragile, but it feels solid to those holding it. It feeds on ignorance. As long as the truth stays buried, behavior escalates. The reveal doesn't need to be dramatic. Sometimes it's a single detail. A name, a history, a fact that reframes everything. In an instant, the roles reverse. The person who was treated as insignificant is suddenly seen as someone to be reckoned with. The confidence of others drains because it was never rooted in reality. It was built on a misunderstanding that can no longer survive. This shift exposes how much behavior depended on false belief. Respect appears where there was none. Apologies rush in. Tones soften. People backtrack, not because their values changed, but because the truth forced them to confront the consequences they hadn't considered. The same actions that felt justified seconds earlier now feel dangerous. That fear reveals the nature of the power they thought they had. Truth doesn't create power. It redistributes it. It strips away the illusion that allowed mistreatment to happen. It reminds everyone involved that power based on assumption is temporary. The person standing in truth doesn't need to raise their voice or assert dominance. The truth does the work for them. It stands firm without effort. What's unsettling is how quickly behavior changes once truth surfaces. The contrast is sharp. It shows that respect was always possible, but it was withheld deliberately. That realization lingers longer than the moment itself. It raises an uncomfortable question about how many times people act unjustly simply because they believe they can. Power shifts also bring silence. The loudest voices often have nothing to say once the truth is known. Their authority evaporates because it was never earned. It was borrowed from ignorance. When that ignorance disappears, so does their control. What remains is exposure, and exposure is difficult to navigate. For the person whose truth is revealed, the moment is not always satisfying. There's no triumph in being believed only after proof is shown. There's a quiet frustration in knowing that dignity was conditional, that it depended on credentials, symbols, or associations rather than basic humanity. The shift in power highlights what should have been present from the start. Truth also forces accountability. Actions taken under false assumptions don't disappear once the truth comes out. They linger. They define character. People can't undo what they've already shown themselves willing to do. The reveal doesn't erase behavior. It exposes it. There is strength in withholding truth until it's necessary. Not as a tactic, but as a reflection of confidence. People who know who they are don't rush to correct every misconception. They allow space for others to reveal themselves first. When truth finally enters the room, it lands with weight because it contrasts so sharply with what came before. Power based on truth is steadier. It doesn't need intimidation or performance. It doesn't rely on someone else being diminished. It exists because it's real. Once revealed, it changes the tone of everything. Conversations slow. Movements become cautious. Words are chosen more carefully. The moment truth is revealed becomes a dividing line. Before it, people acted freely under false confidence. After it, they are aware. That awareness cannot be undone. It reshapes memory, intention, and consequence. And even if the moment passes quickly, the shift remains, altering how everyone involved understands power from that point forward. Honor doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't arrive with titles, uniforms, or declarations. Most of the time, it moves quietly, blending into the background of everyday life. It doesn't demand to be noticed because it isn't looking for approval. Honor is internal. It's a code someone lives by even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. People often expect honor to be visible. They look for symbols that confirm it. Badges, status, reputation, or recognition. When those markers are absent, they assume honor is absent too. This misunderstanding causes people to overlook those who carry themselves with integrity but don't advertise it. Honor becomes mistaken for weakness when it refuses to perform. True honor shows up in restraint, in the decision not to escalate when provoked, in the refusal to exploit an advantage just because it's available, in choosing fairness when cutting corners would be easier. These choices don't draw attention. They don't create spectacle. They pass quietly, but they shape character over time. Honor also lives in consistency. Doing the right thing once can be coincidence. Doing it repeatedly, without reward, without praise, and without recognition, is discipline. That discipline becomes invisible to people who only notice dramatic gestures. Quiet consistency doesn't impress crowds, but it builds trust where it matters. There is a humility that comes with honor. Not the kind that diminishes a person, but the kind that keeps ego in check. Someone with honor doesn't need to assert superiority. They don't correct every insult or defend every assumption. They know who they are, and that knowledge steadies them. Silence, in this case, is not surrender. It's confidence without performance. Honor is often mistaken for compliance. When someone doesn't argue, doesn't boast, and doesn't intimidate, others may assume they can be pushed. This is where misunderstandings begin. People confuse calm with weakness. They test boundaries they shouldn't. They mistake patience for permission. But honor includes limits, and when those limits are crossed, the response is firm, not emotional. Another reason honor goes unnoticed is because it resists self-promotion. In a world that rewards visibility, those who don't market themselves are overlooked. Honor doesn't trend. It doesn't compete for attention. It doesn't need validation from strangers. This makes it easy to dismiss, especially by those who rely on external approval to feel powerful. Honor also exists in responsibility, in taking ownership of mistakes without shifting blame, in protecting others without expecting gratitude, in standing by commitments even when it becomes inconvenient. These acts are rarely seen as impressive in the moment. They're expected, assumed, or ignored. But over time, they reveal a depth of character that appearances can't replicate. People who live with honor often don't correct misconceptions about themselves, not because they can't, but because they don't feel the need to. They understand that truth has a way of surfacing when it matters. Until then, they continue living by their principles, unaffected by how they're perceived. This patience frustrates those who rely on dominance and display. When honor finally becomes visible, it often surprises people, not because it appeared suddenly, but because it was never considered before. The reveal feels abrupt only because no one was paying attention. In hindsight, the signs were always there. The steady behavior, the measured responses, the refusal to compromise values for convenience. There is also a cost to carrying quiet honor. It means being misunderstood. It means being underestimated. It means watching others receive recognition for louder, lesser actions. But honor accepts that cost because it isn't transactional. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't demand fairness from the world. It simply insists on fairness from the self. Honor doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need witnesses to exist. It doesn't rely on fear or admiration. It doesn't demand obedience. It stands on principle alone. And while it may go unnoticed for long stretches of time, when it finally matters, when pressure rises and choices become clear, honor speaks without raising its voice. How we treat strangers defines who we are because strangers remove the performance. There is no shared history, no reputation to protect, no future favor guaranteed. In those moments, behavior is choice alone. Politeness isn't strategic. Kindness isn't transactional. Respect isn't something to be earned through familiarity. It is either present or it isn't. With strangers, people reveal their default setting. There's no audience that matters to them, no relationship to maintain. This is why brief encounters carry so much weight. A few seconds in line, a passing interaction, a chance disagreement. These moments expose values more honestly than long relationships where behavior is often negotiated and managed. Many people treat strangers as obstacles rather than humans. Someone in the way, someone slowing things down, someone easy to dismiss because they don't matter beyond the moment. This mindset creates permission to be rude, dismissive, or aggressive. The absence of consequence feels like freedom, but it's actually exposure. It shows what restraint exists when no one is watching. Respect towards strangers requires empathy without incentive. There's nothing to gain. No approval. No leverage. Just the recognition that another person exists with their own fears, pressures, and limits. Offering patience in these moments is not weakness. It's discipline. It's choosing humanity over convenience. The way people treat strangers often changes in the presence of power. Some become overly polite when they think someone has status. Others become hostile when they believe someone has none. This contrast is revealing. It shows that respect is being rationed instead of practiced as a principle. When respect is conditional, it disappears the moment conditions change. Strangers are also mirrors. They reflect back attitudes people don't realize they carry. Impatience, entitlement, suspicion, or, on the other side, generosity and calm. Because there's no emotional attachment, these traits appear quickly and without disguise. A raised voice, a dismissive glance, a gentle word, small actions that say more than long explanations ever could. Treating strangers well doesn't mean accepting disrespect. Boundaries still matter. But there is a difference between firmness and cruelty, between clarity and contempt. How someone enforces boundaries with a stranger shows emotional maturity. It shows whether they rely on control or on self-respect. Strangers are often the most vulnerable people we encounter. They have no social shield, no familiarity to soften misunderstandings. When they are mistreated, there's often no recourse, no apology, no correction. The harm lingers because it goes unacknowledged. Choosing respect in these moments prevents damage that may never be visible but is deeply felt. There is also a ripple effect in how strangers are treated. One small act of kindness can reset someone's entire day. One moment of humiliation can do the same in the opposite direction. People carry these encounters with them, sometimes longer than interactions with those they know well. This gives everyday behavior unexpected weight. How someone treats strangers also shapes their internal world. Acting with respect reinforces self-respect. Acting with cruelty requires justification, excuses, and denial. Over time, those habits solidify. Character is not built in grand moments. It's built in repeated, unobserved choices. The stranger provides the test. In public spaces, social norms are fragile. They depend on mutual restraint. When someone chooses to disregard a stranger's dignity, they weaken that fabric. They invite chaos and distrust. When someone chooses patience instead, they strengthen it. They contribute to a sense of safety that benefits everyone, including themselves. There is no resume in these moments. No reward. No record. That's why they matter. They show who a person is when nothing is at stake. Not their image. Not their advantage. Just their values. How we treat strangers doesn't just reflect character. It forms it, one quiet decision at a time.